The ice in my water glass had melted an hour ago, leaving behind a lukewarm puddle that tasted faintly of lemon and defeat. I pressed the cold glass against my forehead, hoping the minor relief might somehow extend to the throbbing ache in my feet. 6 hours into my shift at Celestino's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I'd been slinging overpriced pasta for the past 8 months, and my body had already reached its breaking point. The kitchen doors swung open with their usual aggressive force, releasing a blast of heat and the sharp scent of garlic and basil. Marco, the floor manager, appeared in the doorway, his perpetually creased forehead somehow even more wrinkled than usual. "Bella, table 12 needs water refills, and the party in the private dining room will be arriving in 20 minutes, he barked, barely glancing at me as he consulted his clipboard. "VIPs, don't mess this up." I nodded automatically, smoothing down my black server's apron for the 100th time that evening. The fabric was cheap, scratchy against my skin, and no amount of adjusting could make it sit right on my hips. Everything about this job felt like wearing someone else's clothes that didn't quite fit and never would. "Got it," I managed, my voice coming out raspier than intended. I cleared my throat and grabbed a pitcher of ice water, balancing it carefully as I navigated through the maze of linen-covered tables. Celestino's catered to a specific clientele, the kind of people who thought nothing of dropping $300 on a bottle of wine or ordering the chef's tasting menu on a Tuesday night. The dining room was all warm lighting and dark wood, designed to make the wealthy feel sophisticated while they conducted their business deals and extramarital affairs. I was the help. Invisible. Forgettable. And tonight, I was exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. The kind of tired that lived in your bones and made you question every decision that had led you to this moment, serving people who wouldn't remember your face if they saw you on the street tomorrow. My apartment rent was due in 5 days. I was short by $200, even after picking up extra shifts. My car had started making a grinding noise that I couldn't afford to investigate, let alone fix. And my student loans, those persistent reminders of the degree I'd never finished, sent me increasingly aggressive emails every week. This was supposed to be temporary. That's what I'd told myself when I first tied on this apron, fresh from dropping out of Northwestern with a semester and a half to go. Just until I figured things out. Just until something better came along. That was 3 years ago. I finished refilling water glasses at table 12, a quartet of middle-aged businessmen who barely acknowledged my existence, and made my way back toward the kitchen. The restaurant had a strange energy tonight, a buzz of anticipation that I couldn't quite place. The staff moved with extra precision, and Marco had been even more high-strung than usual. "Who's coming to the private room?" I asked Sophia, one of the other servers, as she rushed past with a tray of appetizers. She shot me a look that was equal parts excitement and apprehension. "You really don't know. Would I be asking if I did?" Sophia glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Brandon Cavallo." The name meant nothing to me. I shrugged, waiting for elaboration. "Seriously?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Bella, he owns half the restaurants in Chicago, including this one, probably. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's connected. Italian family. Very powerful. Very dangerous. Mafia?" The word felt ridiculous on my tongue, like something from a movie rather than real life. "Nobody calls it that," Sophia hissed. "But yes. So don't do anything stupid, okay? Just serve, smile, and stay out of the way." Before I could respond, Marco materialized beside us, his face flushed with stress. "The Cavallo party is here. Bella, you're assigned to their room. Try not to screw it up." My stomach dropped. "Why me?" "Because Gina called in sick, and you're the only one available who isn't completely incompetent." He thrust a leather-bound menu toward me. "Go." The private dining room was at the back of the restaurant, accessible through a corridor lined with wine racks and soft lighting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached the closed door, balancing the menus and trying to remember every detail of protocol for VIP service. I took a breath, plastered on my most professional smile, and pushed open the door. The room was smaller than I'd expected. Intimate, with a single long table positioned beneath a chandelier that cast everyone in warm, golden light. 6 men occupied the space, all dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. The air was thick with cologne and cigarette smoke, despite the restaurant's no-smoking policy. And there, at the head of the table, sat a man who commanded attention without saying a word. Brandon Cavallo. Even from across the room, I could feel the weight of his presence. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, eyes that were almost black in the dim lighting, assessing me with the kind of intensity that made my skin prickle. He wore power like a second skin, comfortable and unquestioned. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Welcome to Celestino's. May I start you with something to drink?" The men barely looked at me, continuing their low conversation in Italian. But Brandon's gaze never wavered. He watched me approach the table, watched me set down the menus with hands that wanted to tremble, but didn't. "Water for the table," he said, his voice a low rumble with just a hint of an accent. "And bring us the 2015 Barolo. 2 bottles." I nodded, jotting down the order on my pad. "Of course, sir. I'll be right back with those." As I turned to leave, one of the other men said something in Italian that made the others laugh. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. Dismissive. Crude. Brandon's response was swift and sharp, cutting through the laughter like a blade. The room fell silent. I didn't look back as I slipped out of the private dining room, my face burning with embarrassment I had no reason to feel. Whatever had just been said, Brandon had shut it down. Whether out of respect or authority, I couldn't tell. The rest of the service passed in a blur of wine pouring and course delivery. The men ate with the casual efficiency of people who dined well every night, their conversation flowing between English and Italian. I kept my eyes down, my presence as unobtrusive as possible, exactly as I'd been trained. But I could feel Brandon watching me. Every time I entered the room, every time I leaned forward to refill a glass or clear a plate, his dark eyes tracked my movements with an attention that felt almost predatory. It should have made me uncomfortable. It did make me uncomfortable. But there was something else there too. Something I didn't want to examine too closely. When I brought the check, presented in a leather folder that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck, Brandon barely glanced at it before tucking several $100 bills inside. "Keep the change," he said, his eyes meeting mine for just a moment. The tip was obscene, more than I made in a week. My hands shook slightly as I accepted the folder, murmuring my thanks. As the men began to rise, preparing to leave, one of them, a stocky guy with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, approached me. He smelled like expensive whiskey and aggression. "You did good tonight, sweetheart," he said, his tone making the words feel slimy. "Real good. Maybe you'd like to join us for a drink sometime?" Before I could formulate a polite refusal, Brandon was there. He didn't touch the other man, didn't raise his voice. He simply existed between us, a wall of silent authority. "She's working, Sal," Brandon said, his tone mild but carrying an undercurrent of warning. "Let's go." Sal raised his hands in mock surrender, backing away with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Just being friendly, boss." The men filed out, leaving behind the lingering scent of their presence and an inexplicable tension in the air. I stood frozen in the middle of the private dining room, the leather folder clutched in my hands, trying to understand what had just happened. Marco appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Everything go okay?" "Fine," I said automatically. Everything was fine. But my hands were still shaking. My shift ended at midnight, the restaurant closing with its usual efficiency. I changed out of my server's uniform in the cramped staff bathroom, pulling on jeans and a worn Northwestern hoodie that had seen better days. The tip from Brandon's table was folded carefully in my pocket, a small fortune that could solve my immediate rent crisis. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt unsettled, like something had shifted in a way I couldn't quite identify. The back alley behind Celestino's was poorly lit, as always. I walked quickly toward the street, my keys already in my hand, a defensive habit I'd developed after 3 years of closing shifts in the city. Halfway to the street, I heard voices. Laughter, female laughter, bright and champagne drunk. 3 women emerged from the shadows near the dumpsters, all dressed in cocktail dresses that screamed money and privilege. One of them, a blonde with perfectly styled waves, was someone I recognized from high school. Kaylee Morrison. We'd been friendly once, in that surface-level way of people who shared a few classes but never really connected. Oh my God. Bella? Bella Morgan? Kaylee's voice was too loud, too bright. She stumbled slightly on her heels, catching herself against her friend's shoulder. I haven't seen you in forever. What are you doing here? Working, I said, keeping my response neutral. You? Private party upstairs, one of Kaylee's friends chimed in. A brunette with a designer bag that probably cost more than my car. Kaylee's fiancé rented out the whole floor. How fun, I said, already edging toward the street. Well, it was good to see you. Wait! Kaylee grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so drunk. You have to come with us. We're going to Noir. It's this exclusive club, super hard to get into, but Kaylee's fiancé got us on the list. I really can't. Please, Kaylee pouted. It'll be like old times. Remember when we used to talk about living in the city, going to all the fancy places? This is it, Bella. This is the dream. Looking at Kaylee, at her designer dress and her expensive friends, I realized we had very different definitions of the dream. But there was something in her eyes, a desperate kind of need that I recognized. She wanted to show off, to prove something, maybe to herself as much as to me. And I was so tired of saying no to everything, of going straight home to my empty apartment, of living a life that felt like it was on permanent pause. Okay, I heard myself say. 1 drink. Kaylee squealed, actually squealed, and looped her arm through mine. This is going to be amazing. You're going to love it. And there are going to be so many hot guys there. Maybe you'll finally meet someone. The brunette friend leaned in conspiratorially. We should play a game, like truth or dare, but at the club. Make it interesting. What are we, 16? The third woman, a redhead, laughed. But there was interest in her eyes, too. As we piled into an Uber, Kaylee's phone glowing with messages from her fiancé that she ignored, I wondered what I'd just agreed to. The tip money in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, like a talisman or a warning. I should have gone home, should have paid my rent, bought groceries, been responsible. But I didn't. And that choice, that one small decision to say yes instead of no, would change everything. Noir wasn't just a club. It was a statement, a declaration of wealth and exclusivity that began the moment our Uber pulled up to an unmarked black door on a street I'd walked past 100 times without noticing. No sign, no velvet rope, just a single doorman in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Kaylee swept forward with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, dropping a name I didn't catch. The doorman nodded once, speaking into a discreet earpiece before opening the door to reveal a narrow staircase, bathed in purple light. This way, ladies, he said, his voice professionally neutral. The bass hit me first as we descended, a rhythmic pulse that I felt in my chest before I heard it. Then came the light, strobing patterns of gold and crimson that transformed the underground space into something otherworldly. The club was packed, but not crowded. Every person there looking like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. I felt immediately out of place in my jeans and hoodie. "Come on!" Kaylee shouted over the music, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward a curved bar that glowed from within. "First round's on me." The bartender, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a sleeve of intricate tattoos, took our order with professional efficiency. 4 cosmopolitans materialized in front of us, the pink liquid catching the light like liquid gemstones. "To old friends and new adventures," Kaylee toasted, her eyes already glassy with alcohol and excitement. I sipped my drink, the vodka burning pleasantly on its way down. Around us, Chicago's elite mingled and danced, their conversations a blur of business deals and social climbing that I couldn't follow and didn't want to. Okay. The brunette, whose name I'd learned was Madison, leaned in close. "Truth or dare time. Bella, you first." "I'm not playing truth or dare," I protested, but my voice was lost in the music and their laughter. "Come on," Kaylee pleaded. "Just one, for old time's sake." There was something in her expression, a calculation I didn't like but couldn't quite identify. Still, I was here. I'd already made the choice to step out of my normal life for one night. What harm could one silly game do? Fine, dare. The word came out before I could think better of it. Madison and the redhead, whose name was apparently Sienna, exchanged glances that made my stomach tighten. They huddled together, whispering and giggling, while Kaylee watched me with an expression I couldn't read. "We dare you," Madison finally announced, her voice carrying a cruel edge of amusement. "To walk up to the hottest guy in this club, sit on his lap, and kiss him. A real kiss. 10 seconds minimum." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "That's assault, and insane." "It's just a dare," Sienna laughed. "Live a little, Bella. When's the last time you did something spontaneous?" "When's the last time I did something that didn't end badly?" I wanted to say. But they were all watching me now, waiting to see if I'd back down, if I'd prove myself as boring and predictable as they clearly thought I was. The vodka was making my edges fuzzy, my usual caution slipping, and maybe, just maybe, I was tired of being careful, tired of being invisible. Tired of a life where the most exciting thing that happened was getting a generous tip from a dangerous man, whose last name I couldn't even pronounce correctly. "Fine," I heard myself say, "but I picked the guy." The girls cheered, and Kaylee squeezed my arm with what felt like genuine excitement. "That's the spirit! Show us what Northwestern taught you." I drained the rest of my cosmopolitan for courage and scanned the club, looking for someone who seemed approachable, someone who might laugh off a stranger's kiss rather than take offense, someone safe. And that's when I saw him. Brandon Cavallo sat in a private booth, elevated slightly above the main floor, separated from the crowd by an invisible but unmistakable barrier of power. He was surrounded by men I recognized from the restaurant, including Sal with his scarred eyebrow, all of them engaged in conversation that looked far too serious for a nightclub. He'd changed from his dinner suit into something more casual, black jeans and a fitted black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. His dark eyes swept the crowd with the casual assessment of a predator surveying his territory. Our eyes met across the strobing lights, and something electric shot through me. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by something I couldn't identify. "Him," I said, pointing toward Brandon's booth before I could think better of it. "I choose him." All 3 women followed my gaze, and I watched the color drain from Madison's face. "Not him. Anyone but him." "Why not?" I challenged, my liquid courage overriding my common sense. "You said the hottest guy in the club. That's him." "Bella, you don't understand." Kaylee grabbed my arm, her grip tight enough to hurt. "That's Brandon Cavallo. You can't just walk up to him. You can't just—" "I thought the whole point was to do something crazy," I interrupted, pulling free from her grasp. The vodka and the exhaustion and 3 years of saying no to everything had coalesced into a reckless determination. Or was this dare designed to make me look stupid? Something flickered in Kaylee's eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. But I was already moving, weaving through the crowd toward the elevated booth. Security materialized as I approached, 2 massive men who moved to block my path. "I need to speak with Mr. Cavallo," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "He's not taking visitors," one of them replied, his expression carved from stone. Brandon must have noticed the commotion because he looked up, his dark eyes finding mine. For a moment, I thought he'd have me thrown out. Then his lips curved into something that might have been amusement, and he said something to the security guard I couldn't hear over the music. The wall of muscle parted, and suddenly I was standing at the edge of Brandon's booth, close enough to smell his cologne, the same cedar and spice from the restaurant, but mixed now with whiskey and something darker. "The server from Celestino's," he said, his voice a low rumble that I felt more than heard. "This is unexpected." All of his men were watching me now, their conversations forgotten. Sal grinned like he'd just won a bet. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was insane. I should apologize, walk away, forget this whole stupid dare. But Brandon's eyes held mine, and there was a challenge there, a question about what I would do next. I thought about Kaylee's strange urgency for me to come here, about Madison's calculation, and the dare that seemed designed to humiliate me, about 3 years of being invisible, of saying yes, sir, and no, sir, and disappearing into the background of other people's lives. And I thought, just for tonight, I could be someone else. Someone brave and reckless. Someone who existed. "I have a dare," I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. "From my friends, and I'm choosing you." Brandon's eyebrow rose slightly. "A dare. To sit on your lap and kiss you." I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth. "For 10 seconds, if you're willing." The booth went silent. Even the music seemed to fade as every man there processed what I'd just said. Sal looked like Christmas had come early. Brandon studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned back against the leather booth and patted his thigh once. "By all means," he said, his voice carrying a dark amusement. "I'm curious to see how this plays out." My legs moved before my brain could catch up, carrying me around the table to where Brandon sat. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, all sharp edges and controlled power. I could see a faint scar along his jaw, partially hidden by the shadow of stubble. I sat down on his lap, my heart pounding so hard I was certain he could feel it. His thigh was solid beneath me, muscular and warm even through the denim. His hand came to rest on my hip, steadying me, the touch burning through the fabric of my jeans. "You're shaking," he observed, his breath warm against my ear. "Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted, turning to face him. Our faces were inches apart now, close enough that I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. "Good," he murmured. "Fear keeps you alive." And then, before I could second-guess myself into paralysis, I kissed him. I'd meant it to be brief, performative, just enough to complete the dare and escape with whatever dignity I had left. But the moment my lips met his, something ignited between us. His hand tightened on my hip, pulling me closer, and his other hand came up to cup the back of my neck, with a possessiveness that should have alarmed me but didn't. He kissed like he did everything else, with absolute control and devastating precision. His lips moved against mine with a confidence that made my head spin, and when his tongue traced the seam of my mouth, I opened for him without thinking. The 10 seconds stretched into 15, 20, 30. Time became meaningless as I lost myself in the heat of his mouth. the solid strength of his body beneath me, the way his fingers threaded through my hair with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder than we should be, I could feel every eye in the booth on us. The club's music came rushing back, too loud and too real. "Well," Brandon said, his voice rougher than before, his thumb tracing my jaw with unexpected tenderness. "That was—" The explosion of gunfire cut him off. The sound was deafening even over the music, a rapid staccato of shots that sent the club into immediate chaos. People screamed, diving for cover as the strobing lights continued their oblivious dance. Brandon moved with inhuman speed, flipping me beneath him in one fluid motion, his body a shield over mine as more shots rang out. I could feel his heartbeat against my back, steady despite the chaos, could smell gunpowder mixing with his cologne. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice hard with authority. His men had already drawn weapons, returning fire toward the club's entrance where a group of armed men had appeared. The beautiful people of Noir were now a stampeding mass of panic, crushing toward any available exit. Through the chaos, I heard a voice shouting in Italian, harsh and commanding. Brandon's body tensed above me, recognition and fury rolling off him in waves. "The Morettis," he growled, the name carrying the weight of generational hatred. "Sal, get her out through the back. Now." "Boss! Now!" Brandon roared, and suddenly I was being hauled to my feet by Sal's meaty hands, pulled toward a door I hadn't noticed before. I looked back once, saw Brandon standing fully now, a gun in his hand that he wielded with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this before. His eyes met mine across the chaos, and something passed between us that I didn't understand. Then Sal was pushing me through the door and into a narrow corridor that smelled of garbage and rain. The alley behind Noir was a different world, all shadows and distant sirens and the acrid smell of dumpsters. Sal dragged me forward with one massive hand clamped around my upper arm, his grip just short of painful as he pulled me toward a black SUV idling at the alley's mouth. "Wait," I gasped, trying to pull free. "My friends, Kaylee and the others, they're still in there." "They're fine," Sal said shortly, yanking open the SUV's back door. "Get in." "I'm not getting in some random car with a stranger." Sal spun me around so fast my head spun, his scarred face inches from mine. "Listen to me, sweetheart. Those men who just shot up the club, they're not there for the cocktails. They're there for Brandon, and you just made yourself very interesting by sitting in his lap and kissing him in front of half of Chicago's underworld." His fingers tightened on my arm. "So you can get in this car willingly, or I can throw you in. But one way or another, you're coming with me." Fear crystallized in my chest, sharp and cold. "I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress who made a stupid mistake. That's not how this works." Sal's expression softened slightly, something almost like pity crossing his features. "You chose Brandon Cavallo, in front of witnesses. After what just happened, you're not safe on your own, so get in the goddamn car." The sirens were getting closer. Through the alley's opening, I could see flashing red and blue lights painting the street. Behind us, more gunfire echoed from inside the club, sporadic now, but no less terrifying. I got in the car. Sal slammed the door and ran around to the driver's side, peeling away from the alley before I'd even managed to buckle my seatbelt. The tires squealed on wet pavement as we merged into traffic, leaving Noir and its chaos behind. My hands were shaking, actually shaking, trembling so badly I had to press them against my thighs to make it stop. What had I done? What had I walked into? "Where are we going?" I managed, my voice coming out thin and high. "Somewhere safe," Sal replied, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. "Brandon will meet us there once he's handled the situation." "Handled the situation," I repeated numbly. "You mean the armed men who just tried to kill him? That situation?" Welcome to the life, sweetheart. We drove in silence through streets I recognized, then through areas I didn't, moving steadily away from the city's glittering center toward industrial zones where buildings crouched dark and empty. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a creeping sense of unreality. This couldn't be happening. An hour ago, I'd been a waitress accepting a dare. Now I was fleeing a shootout in an SUV driven by a man who carried a gun as casually as I carried my keys. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to find a dozen missed calls from Kaylee and a string of increasingly frantic texts. Where are you, Bella? OMG, are you okay? Police are here, please tell me you're safe. This wasn't supposed to happen. That last message made my blood run cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. As if something else had been planned. As if the dare hadn't been random at all. Who are the Morettis? I asked, shoving my phone back in my pocket without responding to Kaylee's messages. Sal's jaw tightened. Rival family. They'd been trying to move into Brandon's territory for the past 6 months. This was their play, taking him out in public to show they're not afraid. And they failed. They always do. There was pride in Sal's voice. Brandon's not easy to kill. People have been trying for years. The SUV turned into an underground parking garage, descending several levels before pulling into a spot near an elevator. Sal killed the engine but didn't immediately move to get out. Instead, he turned to look at me, his scarred face serious. Look, I'm going to level with you, because you seem like a decent kid who got in over her head. He paused, choosing his words carefully. That kiss you gave Brandon? That was witnessed by about 40 people, including several who work for families allied with ours. In our world, that kind of public claim means something. It's a statement. I didn't claim anything, I protested. It was just a stupid dare. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality in this business. Sal's expression was almost sympathetic. Those Moretti soldiers who attacked tonight? They saw you. They know Brandon protected you during the shooting. By tomorrow, everyone in Chicago will think you're his girl. The words landed like a physical blow. But I'm not. I'm nobody to him. He doesn't even know my last name. You're about to become very important to him, Sal said grimly. Because the Morettis will absolutely try to use you to get to him. And Brandon won't let that happen. He protects what's his, even if what's his is a waitress who kissed him on a dare. Before I could process that terrifying information, Sal's phone rang. He answered in rapid Italian, his expression darkening as he listened. When he finally hung up, he looked at me with something like resignation. Change of plans. We're not going to the safe house. Brandon wants you brought to his penthouse. He's on his way there now. I want to go home, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Please, just take me back to my apartment. I won't say anything to anyone. I'll pretend tonight never happened. You really think it's that simple? Sal shook his head. Your apartment is probably already being watched. The Morettis work fast. If you go back there alone, you're as good as dead. He wasn't trying to scare me. That's what made it worse. He was simply stating facts, as casually as if he were discussing the weather. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent, except for the mechanical hum of ascent. We climbed so high my ears popped. When the doors finally opened, they revealed not a hallway, but a direct entry into an apartment that took up the entire top floor of the building. The space was sophisticated in a way that made Celestino's look cheap. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. The city spread out below like a carpet of lights. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive leather, everything arranged with careful precision. And standing at those windows, his back to us, was Brandon Cavallo. He'd changed again, now wearing only black slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. His shoulders were tense, his posture that of a man processing violence and planning retribution. "Leave us," he said, without turning around. Sal hesitated. "Boss, the protocols." I said leave us. Sal shot me one last unreadable look before disappearing back into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime, and then I was alone with Brandon Cavallo in his penthouse fortress above the city. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He remained at the windows, and I stood frozen near the elevator, afraid to move further into his territory. "Are you hurt?" he finally asked, his voice low and controlled. "No. Your body blocked everything. Good." He turned then, and I saw that he had blood on his shirt. Not much, just a few dark spots that hadn't been there before. "We need to talk about what happens next." "I want to go home," I said, the same plea I'd given Sal. "This has nothing to do with me. I'm just a waitress who made a mistake. I won't tell anyone anything. I'll move to another city if that's what you want. Just please let me go." Brandon crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Up close, I could see the faint lines of stress around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "It's too late for that," he said quietly. "The moment you kissed me, you became part of this world. The Morettis saw you. They know I protected you. By tomorrow morning, they'll know your name, your address, where you work, everyone you care about." His words confirmed my worst fears. "Then tell them I'm nothing to you. Tell them it was just a dare, that you'd never seen me before tonight. That won't matter." His hand came up to cut my jaw, the touch gentle despite the calluses on his palm. "They'll use you anyway, just to prove they can. Just to hurt me. Why?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why would they care about some random girl you kissed one time?" Something dark and complex moved behind his eyes. "Because in front of 40 witnesses, including people who matter, I treated you like you belonged to me. I pulled you onto my lap. I kissed you back. I threw my body over yours to protect you from bullets." His thumb traced along my cheekbone. "That's not how I treat strangers, Bella. That's how I treat what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. "You don't even know me," I protested weakly. "I know you're brave enough to approach a table full of made men on a dare. I know you kiss like you're drowning and I'm air. I know you taste like vodka and courage." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "And I know that I'm going to keep you alive, whatever it takes. By keeping me prisoner, by keeping you protected." He released my jaw, stepping back to give me space. "You'll stay here until the Moretti situation is resolved. You'll have your own room, your own space, but you won't leave without security. You won't contact anyone from your previous life without clearance, and you won't do anything that might put you at further risk." "That's called kidnapping," I said flatly. "That's called survival." Brandon moved to a bar cart near the windows, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. He brought one to me, pressing it into my hand. "Drink. You're in shock." I wanted to refuse, to maintain some shred of defiance. But my hands were still trembling, and the whiskey might help steady them. I took a sip, the liquid burning pleasantly down my throat. "How long?" I asked. "How long until the Moretti situation is resolved?" Brandon's expression darkened. "As long as it takes. Could be days. Could be weeks. Depends on how stupid they want to be. I have a job, bills, a life. Not anymore." The words were brutal in their honesty. "Your manager at Celestino's has already been informed you're taking an extended leave. Your rent will be paid. Any outstanding debts handled. You'll want for nothing. Except freedom." Except the freedom to get yourself killed, yes. He drained his own whiskey in one swallow. I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But this isn't a negotiation, Bella. This is me telling you how things are going to be until I can guarantee your safety. I should have been screaming. Should have been demanding a lawyer, my phone, something. But exhaustion was creeping in at the edges, making everything feel distant and unreal. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, and suddenly I could barely keep my eyes open. Brandon must have noticed because his expression softened marginally. Elena will show you to your room. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning when you're thinking clearer. A woman appeared as if summoned, middle-aged and efficient-looking, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She nodded to Brandon with familiar respect before gesturing for me to follow her. This way, Miss Bella. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment, all soft grays and whites, with a bed that looked like something from a luxury hotel. There was a bathroom attached, complete with a soaking tub and shower with more controls than my car. A walk-in closet held clothes in my size, everything still bearing designer tags. How? I asked Elena, touching one of the silk blouses with numb fingers. Mr. Cavallo made some calls, she said simply. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, just let me know. I'll have it replaced. She left me alone in this beautiful prison, and I sank onto the edge of the bed, still wearing my jeans and Northwestern hoodie, still smelling like the club and fear and Brandon's cologne. My phone buzzed again. More messages from Kaylee. Please answer me. I'm so sorry this wasn't supposed to go like this. I stared at that last message for a long time. This wasn't supposed to go like this. Meaning there had been a plan. Meaning the dare had been deliberate. Meaning Kaylee had set me up for something. But what? And why? I was too tired to puzzle it out now. I set my phone aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in this penthouse, Brandon Cavallo was probably planning his retaliation against the Morettis. Somewhere in the city, armed men were looking for ways to get to him through me. And I was just Bella Morgan, waitress, college dropout, nobody special. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry was making rent. Now I was caught in a war between crime families because I'd accepted a dare and kissed the wrong man. Or maybe a traitorous part of my mind whispered, exactly the right one. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that I'd fallen asleep in my clothes on top of a bed that probably cost more than my car. For a blissful moment, I thought last night had been a nightmare. Then I saw the designer clothes hanging in the open closet, felt the silk duvet beneath my fingers, and reality came crashing back. Brandon Cavallo, the dare, the shooting, the penthouse prison. My phone showed 6:47 a.m. and 32 missed messages. I scrolled through them with growing unease. Most were from Kaylee, each more frantic than the last. But there were also messages from numbers I didn't recognize, warnings to stay away from Brandon, threats about what happened to girls who got involved with the wrong men. The Morettis, I realized with a chill. They'd already found my number. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Miss Bella? Elena's voice came through the wood. Mr. Cavallo asked me to let you know breakfast is ready when you are. I wanted to refuse, to stay locked in this room and pretend none of this was happening, but my bladder had other ideas, and the smell of coffee drifting through the penthouse was impossible to ignore. I showered quickly, using the array of luxury products that had appeared overnight like magic. The hot water helped clear my head, but it couldn't wash away the fundamental problem. I was trapped here until Brandon decided otherwise, caught in a world I didn't understand with rules I'd never learned. The clothes in the closet fit perfectly, which was both convenient and deeply unsettling. Someone had known my exact measurements, had anticipated my needs before I'd even known I'd be here. I selected the most casual option I could find, dark jeans that hugged my curves, and a soft gray sweater that made me feel less exposed than the silk blouses. Brandon was waiting in the kitchen, or what passed for a kitchen in a penthouse that probably had a private chef on call. He'd changed into a crisp navy suit, his dark hair still damp from his own shower, looking every inch the powerful businessman, rather than the dangerous criminal I knew him to be. "Good morning," he said, his voice neutral as he poured coffee into an expensive-looking mug. "How did you sleep?" "Like a prisoner," I replied, accepting the coffee he offered. The first sip was perfect, strong and black, exactly how I took it. Another detail someone had known about me. "You're not a prisoner, Bella. You're a protected guest. A guest who can't leave. That's called a prisoner where I come from." I set the mug down with more force than necessary. "How long is this going to last? And don't give me the 'as long as it takes' line again." Brandon studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. "The Morettis made their move last night. Now it's my turn. These things have a rhythm to them. Action, response, escalation. If I handle this correctly, you could be free in a few days. And if you don't, then we're both in for a longer stay." He gestured to a plate of pastries and fresh fruit that looked like it came from a 5-star hotel. "Eat. You'll need your strength." I wanted to refuse out of spite, but my stomach had other ideas. I hadn't eaten since my shift at CECI'S, and that felt like a lifetime ago. I selected a croissant and some strawberries, eating mechanically while Brandon watched me with that unnerving intensity. "I need to understand something," I said finally, licking a flake of pastry off my finger. "Last night you said that kiss made me yours, but you also said you barely know me. So which is it? Am I actually important to you, or am I just a complication you need to manage?" Brandon set his coffee down, giving the question the weight it deserved. "When I first saw you at CECI'S yesterday, I thought you were beautiful, tired, clearly working too hard, but beautiful. I noticed the way you moved through the restaurant like you were trying not to take up space, the way you flinched when Sal made that comment but didn't back down." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. "Then you walked into my booth at Noir, shaking but determined, and offered yourself up like a sacrifice for some stupid dare. And when you kissed me..." He paused, his hand coming up to trace along my jaw. "When you kissed me, something shifted, something I wasn't expecting." "That's not an answer," I whispered, even as my body betrayed me by leaning into his touch. "The answer is both," he said simply. "You're a complication I didn't plan for, and you're important to me in ways I'm still figuring out. But regardless of which category you fit into, I protect what's mine. That's not negotiable." Before I could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I need to take this. Elena will be nearby if you need anything. Don't leave the penthouse." He disappeared into what I assumed was his office, leaving me alone in the kitchen with cold coffee and too many questions. I wandered through the penthouse, taking in the space with the attention I hadn't managed last night. Everything was expensive and carefully curated, but there was a coldness to it, like a stage set rather than a home. No photos, no personal touches, nothing that revealed the man who lived here. Except in one corner of the living room, I found a single shelf of worn books. Not the leather-bound decoration pieces that lined other walls, but actual books that had been read and reread, their spines cracked and pages dog-eared. I ran my fingers along them. Classic literature, philosophy, a surprising amount of poetry. "He reads those when he can't sleep." Elena's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Most people see the power and the danger. They don't see the man who reads Dante at 3 a.m. "You've worked for him long?" I asked. 15 years, since he was barely more than a boy." Elena's expression softened. "He's not what you think, Miss Bella. Not entirely. He's a criminal," I said bluntly. People tried to kill him last night. People he's presumably killed himself. Yes, Elena agreed simply. But he's also the man who paid for my daughter's cancer treatment when my insurance wouldn't cover it. The man who makes sure every family in his organization has health care and pension plans. The man who won't allow drugs or prostitution in any business he controls. She paused. He's complicated, but he's not a monster. Before I could process that information, Brandon's office door slammed open. He emerged looking grimmer than I'd seen him, his jaw tight with fury. "We have a problem," he said, his eyes finding mine across the penthouse. "How well do you know Kaylee Morrison?" The question felt like a trap. We went to high school together. We weren't close then, and we haven't talked in years until last night. "What about her fiancé, Marco Moretti?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Moretti. Kaylee was engaged to a Moretti. "I didn't know," I said quickly. She never mentioned his last name. Just said he was her fiancé, that he'd gotten us into noir. I stopped, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. It was a setup. The dare wasn't random. She wanted me to approach you. "Smart girl," Brandon said grimly. "My contacts confirmed it this morning. Marco Moretti paid Kaylee to reconnect with you, to get you into that club, and to dare you to approach me specifically. They wanted to plant someone in my life, someone innocent who'd be easy to manipulate or use against me." "But the shooting, you said the Morettis attacked you." "That wasn't part of their plan," Brandon cut in. "That was Giovanni Moretti, Marco's cousin, going rogue. He thought he could end this quickly by taking me out in public. Marco didn't authorize it, which is why the attack was so sloppy." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Now Marco's in damage control, trying to salvage his original plan while dealing with his cousin's mess. I sank onto the leather couch, my mind reeling. Kaylee had used me, had set me up like a pawn in a game I didn't even know was being played. So, what happens now? Brandon sat beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Now I use you the way they intended to use you, but in reverse." "What does that mean?" His dark eyes met mine, and I saw calculation there mixed with something almost like regret. "It means you're going to help me destroy the Moretti family from the inside out. And in return, I'm going to give you your freedom and enough money to never have to work another double shift at Celestino's." "I don't want to be involved in this," I protested. "I don't want any part of your war." "You're already involved," Brandon interrupted, his voice hard. "The moment Kaylee chose you for this setup, you became part of it. The only question is whether you're going to be a passive victim or an active participant." He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of text messages. They were from Kaylee, sent this morning. "Is she okay?" "Please tell me she's okay. Marco is furious about what happened. He wants to meet with her. I can fix this. Just let me talk to her." "She's trying to maintain contact," Brandon explained. "Trying to salvage their plan by playing the concerned friend. If we cut her off completely, Marco will know his operation is burned. But if you respond, if you keep the connection alive..." He let the sentence hang. "You want me to spy on them," I said slowly. "To pretend I don't know about the setup so I can feed you information." "I want you to help me end this before more people get hurt." Brandon's hand covered mine, his touch warm despite the coldness of the conversation. "The Morettis won't stop, Bella. Even if I let you go, even if you disappear, they'll find you eventually. The only way you're truly safe is if their family is dismantled completely. And if I refuse?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Then I keep you here until I can guarantee your safety through other means, which could take months, maybe years." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Or you could help me, and this could all be over in a week. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice, and we both knew it. But at least this way, I'd have some agency in my own fate. I'd be doing something rather than passively waiting to see what Brandon decided for me. What exactly would I have to do? I asked. Brandon's lips curved into something that might have been approval. First, you respond to Kaylee. Tell her you're safe, that you're staying with a friend while you figure things out. Be scared, but not too scared. Confused about what happened. Make her think you still trust her. And then we wait for Marco to make his next move. He'll want to meet with you, to assess the damage and see if his plan is salvageable. When he does, I'll be listening to every word. He pulled a small device from his pocket, no bigger than a button. This is a microphone, state-of-the-art, completely undetectable. You'll wear it whenever you meet with Kaylee or any of the Morettis. I stared at the tiny piece of technology, understanding the full weight of what he was asking. This is dangerous. If they find out I'm working with you, they won't, Brandon said with absolute certainty. I'll have people watching you every second. The moment anything feels wrong, we extract you. You'll never be truly alone with them. But I'll be bait. You're already bait, he countered. This way, you're bait with teeth. I looked at him, at his handsome, dangerous face, at the certainty in his dark eyes. He'd kill for me, I realized. Was probably planning to kill for me. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, it sent a thrill through me that I absolutely did not want to examine. If I do this, I said slowly, I have conditions. Brandon's eyebrow rose. I'm listening. First, you tell me everything. No more vague explanations about the business or the situation. I want to know exactly what I'm walking into. Agreed. Second, when this is over, I'm free to go. No strings attached. No lingering protection or surveillance. You let me walk away. Something flickered in his expression, but he nodded. If that's what you want. And third, I paused, gathering my courage. You teach me to protect myself. Basic self-defense, how to handle a gun, whatever I need to know to survive in your world. Because even if I walk away, I'll always know what I know now. I'll always be a potential target for someone. Brandon studied me for a long moment, and I saw respect dawn in his eyes. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes to all 3 conditions. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? I looked at his hand, at the offer of partnership that came with it. This was insane. I should be demanding to speak to a lawyer, to the police, to someone who existed in the normal world I'd inhabited just 24 hours ago. But that world was gone now, shattered the moment I'd sat on a Mafia Boss's lap on a dare. The only way forward was through. I shook his hand. We have a deal. Brandon's fingers closed around mine, and he pulled me closer, his other hand coming up to cup my face. I promise you, Bella, I'll keep you safe, whatever it takes. Then he kissed me, and it was nothing like the performative kiss from Noir. This was claiming, possessive and demanding in a way that made my knees weak. His tongue swept into my mouth, and I found myself pressing closer, my hands fisting in his expensive suit jacket. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. You taste even better when you're not terrified, he murmured. I'm still terrified, I admitted, just in a different way. His laugh was low and dark. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He pulled back, business mode sliding over him like a mask. Now, let's get started. We have a lot of work to do, and Marco Moretti won't wait forever. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Brandon kept his word, explaining the intricacies of Chicago's criminal landscape with the patience of a professor lecturing a particularly attentive student. I learned about territories and tribute, about the delicate web of alliances that kept the city's underworld in a constant state of Cold War. I learned which families could be trusted, and which would stab you in the back for nothing more than bragging rights. Most importantly, I learned about the Morettis. They were old money, Brandon explained, their family tree stretching back to Sicily and stained with generations of blood. Marco was the current head, young and ambitious, eager to expand his territory beyond the traditional boundaries his father had maintained. Giovanni, the cousin who'd orchestrated the attack at Noir, was the family's enforcer, beloved by the soldiers but considered too unstable for leadership. "The split between Marco and Giovanni is our advantage," Brandon said, pointing to photos pinned on a board in his office. "Giovanni's attack last night wasn't sanctioned. It embarrassed Marco in front of the other families. Now Marco has to choose between punishing his cousin, which makes him look weak to his own men, or supporting Giovanni's rogue action, which makes him look out of control." "And you're going to exploit that division," I said, understanding the strategy. "We're going to exploit it," Brandon corrected. "You're the key to this, Bella. Marco invested time and resources into planting you in my life. He won't abandon that investment easily, especially now that Giovanni's created additional complications." I'd responded to Kaylee's messages that first morning, playing the part of a confused, frightened girl who just wanted to understand what had happened. Kaylee had been effusively apologetic, swearing she had no idea the club would be attacked, begging me to meet for coffee so she could explain everything. I'd agreed, of course. That was the plan. But Brandon didn't just prepare me intellectually. True to his word, he'd begun teaching me to protect myself. Each morning, after breakfast, we'd go to a gym he maintained in the building's basement. It was there that I discovered Brandon Cavallo was a patient, but demanding teacher. "Again," he said for the 20th time, holding up padded mitts. "Strike with your palm, not your fist. You'll break your hand punching like that." I hit the mitts harder, putting my whole body into it the way he'd shown me. The impact jarred up my arm, but satisfyingly so. "Better," Brandon acknowledged. "Now show me the eye strike we practiced yesterday." I demonstrated the movement, my fingers jabbing toward his eyes in a strike that would have blinded an attacker if executed with full force. "Good. And if someone grabs you from behind?" I went through the sequence without thinking. Stamp on the instep, elbow to the ribs, turn and strike to the throat. "Excellent." Brandon lowered the mitts, a genuine smile crossing his face. "You're a fast learner." "I'm motivated," I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. "Nothing like armed men trying to kill you to make you take self-defense seriously." The smile faded. "About that, I want to show you something." He led me to a section of the gym I hadn't noticed before, concealed behind a false wall. When he pressed a hidden panel, the wall slid aside to reveal a small arsenal. Handguns, rifles, and weapons I couldn't even name were displayed with military precision. "Choose one," Brandon said. "We'll start with handguns before moving to anything else." I selected the smallest pistol, its weight surprisingly heavy in my hand. Brandon moved behind me, his body bracketing mine as he adjusted my grip. "Like this," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Both hands, firm but not tense. The gun is a tool, not a lifeline. It extends your will, but you control it, not the other way around. For the next hour, he taught me the basics: safety, stance, sight alignment, trigger control. We moved to a soundproofed range deeper in the basement, and he had me fire round after round into paper targets until the movements became automatic. "You're not half bad," he said, examining my target. Most of my shots had clustered around center mass, with a few wild ones scattered at the edges. "With more practice, you'd be dangerous." I thought I was already dangerous, I teased, surprising myself with the flirtation. "Didn't you call me your secret weapon?" Brandon's eyes darkened with something that had nothing to do with violence. "You're dangerous in more ways than one, Bella Morgan." The air between us shifted, charged with the tension that had been building since that first kiss. He stepped closer, taking the gun from my hands and setting it carefully aside. His fingers traced along my jaw, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "You should know," he said quietly, "that when this is over, when you're free to walk away, I'm not sure I'll be able to let you go." My breath caught. That wasn't our deal. "I know." His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "But somewhere between teaching you to throw a punch and watching you learn to shoot, you stopped being just a complication I needed to manage. You became something more." "Brandon." He kissed me before I could finish the protest, and this time there was no audience, no performance, no ulterior motive. This was just him and me, and the undeniable chemistry that had been building between us. I kissed him back with an intensity that surprised us both, my hands fisting in his shirt as he backed me against the wall. His body pressed against mine, solid and warm, and I could feel his heartbeat racing almost as fast as my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I need you to understand something. When I protect you, when I say you're mine, it's not just strategy. It's not just about beating the Morettis or maintaining appearances. It's real, Bella. This is real." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was confusing proximity with attraction, danger with desire. But the truth was that I felt it too. This pull between us that went beyond circumstances. I'd started to look forward to our training sessions, to the breakfast conversations where he'd tell me stories about his childhood in Sicily, to the late nights when we'd sit on his balcony and he'd point out constellations while explaining the mythology behind each one. He was dangerous, yes. A criminal, absolutely. But he was also brilliant and complicated, and surprisingly gentle when he thought no one was watching. And I was falling for him in a way that terrified me more than any threat from the Morettis. "This is complicated," I whispered. "Everything worth having is." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression shifting back to business. "Kaylee just confirmed. Coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m. at that place in Lincoln Park she suggested." Reality came crashing back. Tomorrow I'd put our plan into action. Tomorrow, I'd sit across from a woman I'd once considered a friend and lie to her face while wearing a wire. "I'm ready," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Brandon studied me for a long moment. "Sal and 2 others will be nearby. I'll be monitoring the conversation in real time. The moment anything feels wrong—" "I know," I interrupted. "You'll extract me. You've told me 12 times. I'll tell you 12 more if that's what it takes." His hand cupped my face, his touch gentle despite the hardness in his eyes. "You're important to me, Bella. More important than beating the Morettis. If it comes down to a choice between your safety and this plan, I choose you. Every time." The declaration should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it settled something in my chest. A warmth that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with trust. "I won't let you down," I promised. "That's not what I'm worried about." And the coffee shop Kaylee had chosen was deliberately public, a trendy place in Lincoln Park where young professionals lingered over overpriced lattes and artfully plated avocado toast. The kind of place where nobody would expect a confrontation, which made it perfect for what the Morettis likely had planned. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing the wire Brandon had provided beneath a simple sweater. It was invisible, undetectable, but I was hyper-aware of its presence nonetheless. Sal sat 3 tables away, hidden behind a newspaper like something out of a bad spy movie. 2 other members of Brandon's crew had positions at opposite ends of the cafe. And somewhere, Brandon was listening to every word through an earpiece, ready to intervene if necessary. Kaylee arrived exactly on time, looking immaculate in expensive activewear that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck used to. She rushed to embrace me, and I forced myself not to stiffen at the contact. "Bella, thank God," she breathed, pulling back to examine my face. I've been so worried. Are you okay? Where have you been staying? With a friend, I said, keeping my answer vague as Brandon had instructed. I didn't feel safe going back to my apartment after what happened. We settled into a corner table, and Kaylee ordered us both coffee with the casual authority of someone used to being served. When the barista left, she leaned in close, her expression appropriately concerned. I'm so sorry about what happened at Noir, she said, and she almost sounded sincere. I had no idea there would be violence. If I'd known... How could you have known? I interrupted, watching her carefully. It's not like you're psychic. Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. I just feel responsible. I'm the one who convinced you to come out that night. I'm the one who suggested that stupid dare. About that, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Why did you dare me to approach Brandon Cavallo specifically? Out of everyone in that club, why him? Kaylee's pause was just a beat too long. He was hot. You said to pick the hottest guy, and that was him. It wasn't that deep, Bella. She was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes slid away from mine, in the slight tension around her mouth. But I played along, nodding as if I believed her. Well, it certainly got complicated fast, I said with a self-deprecating laugh. One kiss, and suddenly I'm caught in the middle of some gang war. Is that what Cavallo told you? Kaylee asked, a little too quickly. That it was a gang war. I frowned, as if confused by the question. He didn't tell me anything. I've barely seen him since that night. His security people got me out of the club, made sure I was safe. And that was it. Why? Is there more I should know? Kaylee relaxed slightly, buying my performance. No. Marco mentioned that Cavallo might try to use the situation to his advantage. You know, claim you need his protection when really he's just trying to manipulate you. Marco, I repeated, as if just making the connection. Your fiancée, the one you never mentioned by last name. Color rose in Kaylee's cheeks. I wanted you to like him for him, not because of his family name. The Morettis are kind of a big deal in Chicago. So I'm learning. I leaned forward, playing the role of confused innocent perfectly. Kaylee, what exactly is your fiancé's family business? Import-export, she said automatically, the lie smooth and practiced. Shipping, mostly. They have contracts all over the world. And the shooting at Noir? Does that have something to do with their business? No, Kaylee said quickly. Too quickly. That was completely unrelated. Just some random violence. You know how the city can be. I nodded as if accepting this obvious lie, taking another sip of my coffee. Through the wire, I knew Brandon was hearing every word, cataloging every deception. Marco would like to meet you, Kaylee said, changing the subject with poorly disguised eagerness. To apologize in person for what happened, and to make sure you're really okay. There it was, the real purpose of this meeting. I don't know, I said hesitantly. After everything that happened. Please, Kaylee urged, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. It would mean so much to him, to both of us. And honestly, Bella, I think it might help you feel safer. Marco has a lot of influence in this city. If you're under his protection, nobody would dare mess with you. Nah, the irony would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. She was trying to sell me on the very protection I already had, just from the opposing side. I'll think about it, I said finally. But Kaylee, I need you to be honest with me. Is there something going on that I should know about, between Marco's family and Brandon Cavallo? Kaylee's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Stay away from Cavallo, she said urgently. Whatever he's told you, Whatever he's offered you, stay away. He's dangerous, Bella. More dangerous than you can imagine. Is Marco dangerous too? I asked quietly. Marco is. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Marco is complicated, but he's good to the people he cares about, and I think he'd care about you, especially because you're important to me. Because I'm your old friend, I said, watching her face. Because you're my old friend, she agreed. But the lie sat heavy between us. We finished our coffee with strained small talk about old high school classmates and memories that felt like they belonged to different people. When Kaylee finally left, promising to text me about meeting Marco, I remained at the table, finishing my now cold coffee and trying to process everything I'd just learned. She was good, I'd give her that. If I hadn't known about the setup, I might have believed her concern was genuine. But every word had been calculated, every gesture designed to manipulate me toward exactly where the Morettis wanted me. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. You did perfectly. Come home. Home. When had I started thinking of his penthouse as home? Sal materialized at my elbow, his scarred face impassive. Car's waiting, sweetheart. Let's go. The drive back was quiet, Sal's usual gruffness subdued. When we pulled into the building's private garage, Brandon was already there, waiting by the elevator. How do you feel? He asked as soon as I was within earshot. Like I just betrayed someone who betrayed me first, I admitted. It's complicated. He pulled me into his arms and I went willingly, pressing my face against his chest and breathing in his familiar scent. You did well, he murmured into my hair. We got everything we needed. What happens now? Now we wait for Marco to make his next move. And when he does, Brandon's arms tightened around me. We'll be ready. Marco Moretti's invitation came through Kaylee 2 days later. Dinner at Rossi's, an upscale Italian restaurant in the Gold Coast that, according to Brandon's intel, was neutral territory, not controlled by either family, but respected by both. The invitation extended to, and guest, which Marco surely knew meant I'd bring Brandon if I had any sense. I didn't. Or at least, that's what we wanted him to think. This is the move, Brandon explained, studying the message on my phone. Marco's trying to separate you from my influence, to get you alone where he can make his pitch. He'll promise protection, probably offer you money, and subtly suggest that aligning with me is dangerous. So I should refuse? No, you accept. But you insist on bringing a friend for safety, someone female, non-threatening, someone Marco won't see as part of my organization. That's how Elena ended up being recruited for spy duty. She cleaned up beautifully, I discovered. Her usual severe appearance transformed by elegant styling and a designer dress that made her look like someone's sophisticated aunt rather than a housekeeper for the mob. I used to do this for Mr. Cavallo's father, she explained as we prepared for the dinner. Before I retired to quieter duties. Don't worry, Cara. I know how to handle men like Marco Moretti. The wire I wore for this meeting was even more sophisticated than the first, disguised as an expensive necklace Brandon had given me that morning. If anything goes wrong, he'd said while fastening it around my neck. Anything at all, you say the code word and we storm the place. I don't care about the mess or the exposure. Your safety comes first. The code word was Northwestern, a reference to my abandoned degree that would sound natural in conversation, but specific enough to trigger an immediate response. Rossi's was elegant in that old-world way, all dark wood and candlelight, with a pianist playing soft jazz in one corner. Marco had reserved a private table in an alcove that offered both intimacy and a clear view of the entire restaurant. Strategic positioning. He stood when we approached, and I got my first real look at the man who'd orchestrated this entire mess. Marco Moretti was handsome in a polished way, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his smile carefully calibrated to put me at ease. He looked like a young executive, not a crime lord. Bella, he said warmly, taking my hand and kissing it in a gesture that felt both courtly and possessive. I'm so glad you agreed to meet, and you brought a friend. Excellent. This is my Aunt Elena, I lied smoothly. She's visiting from out of town, and I didn't want to leave her alone. Elena played her part perfectly, offering a polite smile and a limp handshake that suggested she was neither impressed nor intimidated by Marco Moretti. Pleasure, she said in accented English, thickening her natural inflection deliberately. We settled into our seats, and Marco immediately took control of the conversation, ordering an expensive bottle of wine and suggesting dishes like he owned the restaurant. Maybe he did. First, let me apologize, he began once the server had departed. What happened at Noir was inexcusable. You were caught in something that had nothing to do with you, and for that I am deeply sorry. Kaylee said it was random violence, I replied carefully. Just wrong place, wrong time. Something flickered in Marco's eyes. Approval, maybe, that I was sticking to the script. In a sense, yes. But Chicago can be dangerous for beautiful women who catch the wrong person's attention. He paused meaningfully. Brandon Cavallo's attention, for instance. I barely know Brandon Cavallo, I said, which was technically true if you ignored the fact that I'd been living in his penthouse and learning to shoot his guns. I served his table at the restaurant where I work. Then there was that stupid dare at the club. That's the extent of our relationship. Is it? Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. Because my sources tell me you've been staying somewhere other than your apartment since that night. Somewhere you won't tell even your good friend Kaylee about. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm staying with another friend. After what happened, I didn't feel safe going back to my place alone. Is that strange? Not strange. Understandable. Marco leaned forward, his voice dropping to something more intimate. But Bella, I want you to understand something about Brandon Cavallo. He's not a good man. He's dangerous, violent, and he uses people. If he's offered you protection, it's only because he sees a way to use you against me. Against you? I let confusion color my voice. Why would he want to use me against you? Marco hesitated, clearly trying to decide how much to reveal. My family and his have complicated history. And when you kissed him in front of half of Chicago's connected people, you became a symbol of something. A claim. Whether you intended to or not, you made yourself important to him. I don't want to be important to him, I said, which was perhaps the most honest thing I'd said all evening. I don't want to be important to anyone in this world. I just want to go back to my normal life. And you can, Marco said eagerly. That's what I'm offering you, Bella. Protection, yes, but also freedom. I can make sure Cavallo loses interest, that he sees you as the non-issue you actually are. But I need something from you in return. Here it was, the real pitch. What do you need? Information. Nothing complicated. Nothing dangerous. Just, if Cavallo contacts you, if he tries to continue whatever relationship he thinks you have, I need you to tell me. What he says, what he asks about, where he goes. Marco's hand covered mine on the table. In return, I'll make sure you're protected. I'll pay off your student loans, get you a better job, maybe at one of my legitimate businesses. You'll never have to work another double shift at Celestino's. It was a good offer, tempting, even. If I'd been the person Marco thought I was, a civilian caught accidentally in their war, I might have taken it. How do you know about my student loans? I asked instead. Marco's smile was unapologetic. I make it my business to know things, Bella. Just like I know you're 3 months behind on rent. Like I know your car is making a noise that probably means transmission trouble you can't afford to fix. Like I know you're barely surviving, and I'm offering you a way out. Beside me, Elena stiffened almost imperceptibly. This was more aggressive than we'd anticipated, more revealing of how thoroughly the Morettis had investigated me. "That's a lot of information about someone you claim is unimportant," I said carefully. "You became important when Kaylee identified you as someone in Brandon's orbit, when she confirmed you were clean, desperate, and exactly the kind of person who could get close to him without raising suspicion." Marco's mask slipped slightly, showing the calculating criminal beneath. "Don't play dumb, Bella. We both know what this is. I'm offering you a business arrangement. Be my eyes and ears, and I'll take care of your problems." "And if I refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then you remain a civilian caught between two families at war. And civilians, unfortunately, tend to be collateral damage." It was a threat, thinly veiled but unmistakable. Across the restaurant, I saw Sal shift position slightly, his hand moving toward where I knew he kept his gun. Brandon's voice crackled through the hidden earpiece I wore. "Easy. Stay calm. We need him to keep talking." "That sounds like a threat, Marco," Elena said suddenly, her accented English disappearing to reveal perfect, unaccented words. "And threats against women under Brandon Cavallo's protection tend to be very bad for one's health." Marco's head snapped toward Elena, seeing her properly for the first time. Recognition dawned, followed by fury. "You're not her aunt. You work for Cavallo." "I've worked for the Cavallo family for 15 years, Elena confirmed calmly. "Long enough to recognize a clumsy setup when I see one. Did you really think Brandon wouldn't know about your little plan? That he wouldn't protect Bella the moment she became important to him?" "This was a setup," Marco breathed, his face flushing with anger. "You've been wearing a wire this whole time." "Actually, it's a necklace," I corrected, touching the diamond pendant at my throat. "The wire is just a bonus feature." Marco stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Around us, I sensed movement, his security detail recognizing the shift in situation, preparing for violence. "You made a mistake," Marco said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Brandon Cavallo might think he's untouchable, but he's not. Neither are you. Marco." The new voice came from behind us, deep and commanding, and absolutely certain of its authority. Brandon stepped into view, flanked by Sal, and 4 other men I recognized from his security team. "I think we're past the point of threats, don't you?" The restaurant had gone silent, other diners sensing the danger even if they didn't understand its source. The pianist had stopped playing, his hands frozen above the keys. Marco's security team was outnumbered and outgunned, and everyone knew it. But Marco's pride wouldn't let him back down completely. "This is neutral territory, Cavallo. You can't touch me here." "You're right. I can't." Brandon moved to stand beside my chair, his hand coming to rest possessively on my shoulder. "But I can make sure everyone in Chicago knows exactly what you did. How you used your fiancée to set up an innocent woman. How you threatened her when she refused to spy for you. How you showed such disrespect to the concept of neutral territory by treating it as your personal recruiting ground." "They won't care," Marco spit. "She's nobody." "She's mine," Brandon corrected, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "And everyone will care about that." Brandon pulled out his phone, tapping the screen once. Immediately, the restaurant's sound system crackled to life, and our entire conversation with Marco began playing through the speakers. His threats, his manipulation, his confession about the setup. Every word, broadcast for everyone to hear. Marco's face went white. "You can't—" "I already did. This recording has been sent to every family head in Chicago. By morning, everyone will know how the Morettis operate. How you put civilians in danger. How you violated the sanctity of neutral territory." Brandon's smile was cold and sharp. "You wanted to use Bella to destroy me, Marco. Instead, you've destroyed yourself." The other restaurant patrons were recording now, phones out and capturing everything. In the age of social media, Marco's downfall was going viral in real time. "You'll pay for this," Marco said, But the threat was empty, the power already drained from his voice. No. You will. You and your whole family. Brandon's hand tightened on my shoulder. Because you made the mistake of threatening what's mine. And I protect what's mine with everything I have. Brandon guided me toward the exit, his security forming a protective cordon around us. Elena walked beside me, her brief return to active duty apparently successful. We need to leave, Sal muttered. Giovanni Moretti is on his way with reinforcements. This is about to get messy. We moved quickly, but without panic, piling into waiting SUVs that peeled away from the restaurant just as more cars arrived. Through the rear window, I watched chaos unfold, Giovanni's men confronting Marco's security, the situation escalating exactly as Brandon had predicted. Did you know Giovanni would come? I asked as we drove back to the penthouse. I counted on it, Brandon admitted. Marco and Giovanni have been at odds since the Noir attack. This public humiliation will be the final straw. By morning, the Moretti family will be too busy with their own civil war to worry about you or me. The penthouse felt like a sanctuary after the tension of the restaurant. Elena disappeared to her quarters, leaving Brandon and me alone in the living room with its view of the glittering city below. It's over? I asked, still trying to process everything that had happened. The immediate threat? Yes. Marco's reputation is destroyed, his authority undermined. He'll be lucky if his own family doesn't remove him from power. Brandon poured us both whiskey, handing me a glass. You're safe, Bella. You can go back to your life whenever you're ready. It was what I'd wanted, what we'd agreed on. Freedom, a return to normalcy. But as I stood there in Brandon's penthouse, looking at the man who'd protected me, taught me, shown me a world I never knew existed, I realized something had changed. I'd changed. What if I don't want to go back? The words came out before I could stop them. What if that life doesn't fit me anymore? Brandon set his glass down, turning to face me fully. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between learning to shoot your guns and wearing a wire to dinner with a crime boss, I stopped being that scared waitress from Celestino's. I'm saying that you were right. This is real. What's between us? It's real. I moved closer, closing the distance between us. I'm saying I choose you, if you'll have me. Bella, he breathed, his hands coming up to frame my face. You understand what you're choosing? This world, this life, it's dangerous, it's complicated. You'll never be fully safe. I'll be safer with you than without you, I replied. And I'd rather be in danger with you than bored without you. He kissed me then, and it was different from all the other kisses. This one was a promise, a claiming that went both ways. I was his, yes, but he was mine too. Equal partners in this dangerous world we'd navigate together. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he pulled me against his chest, and I could hear his heartbeat, steady and sure. Our daughters are going to be terrifying, he murmured into my hair. Our daughters? I pulled back to look at him, surprised. Years from now, he clarified, a smile playing at his lips. When we've made this city safe enough to raise them in, when we've built something better than what came before, our daughters will be fierce and smart, and they'll know how to handle themselves in any situation. That's quite a future you're planning, I said, but I was smiling too, imagining it. I'm a strategist, remember? I plan everything. His expression grew serious. But I mean it, Bella. If you choose this, if you choose me, I want everything. Not just today or tomorrow. Everything. I thought about the dare that had started all of this. The simple act of sitting on a stranger's lap and kissing him. How that one moment of reckless bravery had transformed my entire life, had led me here, to this man, to this choice. Some people would say I was crazy. Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding or any number of psychological explanations for why a former waitress would choose to stay with a mafia boss. But they hadn't been there. They hadn't seen the gentleness beneath Brandon's dangerous exterior, hadn't experienced the respect and partnership he offered. They didn't understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was the safest choice you could make. Everything, I agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Below us, Chicago glittered with possibility. Somewhere out there, the Moretti family was tearing itself apart. Somewhere, other families were recalibrating their relationships with the Cavallo organization. Somewhere, the world was shifting to accommodate this new reality. Brandon Cavallo and his fearless partner who'd walked into his world on a dare and decided to stay. And I wouldn't have it any other way.